Good afternoon. If you've just joined us, this is eNCA channel 403 and we continue with our rolling elections coverage. To this now, close to 2 million eligible 18 to 19-year-old voters decided not to register in this year's municipal elections. This adds to the general decline of registered voters, causing concern. The 20 to 29 age group have declined since 2016. To speak more about this as the youth vote, we're joined by activist Bonga Makhanya. Bonga, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Bonga, analysts today have been speaking of poor turnout, particularly among the youth. Now, one would assume that a disillusioned youth would be the first at the polls to ensure that there's change in terms of the things that they're dissatisfied with. Why is that not the case?
So, and thanks once again for having me. And I appreciate the question. I think it's kind of a multi-layered answer to your question. It's kind of two-pronged. So there's young people in this country who are the dejected sort of masses who are literally on the outskirts, languishing in poverty, and have voted for the past maybe one or two elections. And they've not seen any material change in their lives. So that creates a lot of distrust in the system, distrust in the political system, and them not wanting to come back and vote. Secondary to that is young people who are just simply not interested. And there's a number of reasons for that. And one of them, like I said, is them not seeing the institutions work for them. You elect your ward councillor, but, for example, there's still outages and it takes quite a while for people to resolve those issues. People that are not necessarily in poverty, but they're also disgruntled at the political system and the bureaucracy that's there, where you go to your local councillor or you go to your local public institution and the service delivery takes a while, no matter who you put in place. So I think that's why quite a large number of young people tend to not show up to the polls. They don't see it resulting in material change. Yeah.
But then now, looking at government's efforts, we've all known that the youth are on the periphery of this economic activity in the country.
Yes.
But do you see any genuine efforts on government's part to sort of maybe fund SMMEs?
Look, I think government has tried its best with its limited resources to do what it can to fund SMMEs. But the simple answer is no. There's a lot of young, real SMMEs, business owners, who wake up every morning and go sell fruits and vegetables on the streets. They go and sell sort of, like, I even know of a local young lady who has a little bakery where she bakes bread and bread rolls. But the opportunity to scale up is not there. When they apply to institutions like the NYDA or your local government institutions, funding institutions, usually they don't get it as a response, or some of the time they get rejected.
Do you think there's a disconnect here where government doesn't fully appreciate that the biggest employer now is going to be these SMMEs? Because I was listening to President Ramaphosa yesterday in Katlehong talking about government having been an employer of 8 million individuals since 1994. And he said the problem remains that every year there are more people seeking jobs, which goes without saying. Every year there would be people.
Yeah.
But it seemed to me there was a disconnect that you're not supposed to necessarily be an employer as government, but an enabler of economic activity in the form of funding these SMMEs that will hire. Do you think there's that disconnect?
Yes, there is a large disconnect. And for me, the blame is on government, but also the private sector. I say the private sector because you have a large group of big business, some forms of oligopolies, who every year they make profits, and instead of those profits turning into job creation, where they expand the operations, they hire more people, they end up actually issuing out dividends to their shareholders or whatever the case may be, and they don't actually reinvest into the economy. So government needs to have a hard stance on big business not reinvesting into the economy, holding large volumes of wealth and large volumes of capital. This country has a huge crisis where we have a lot of liquidity. It's quite actually abnormal into international standards, the amount of liquidity the South African market has. So government must play a role in ensuring that big business not only just creates jobs or whatever, but also must fund and incorporate SMMEs into their supply chain. I'll make an example of Macro, where Macro is a big wholesale supplier. instead of just having Albany or big bread companies, they must go to local bakeries who, for example, have been SMMEs for the past couple of years and they're not scaling up. Macro must play a role of putting those people onto their shelves.
But you have a situation where government prides itself with being that haven where, you know, big business can come into the country because they have such policies that are enabling for big business.
Yes.
They pride themselves with this. So what do we do now when this has been that draw card?
So what we do now, we need to cut the spending cuts. Treasury right now is saying that they want to achieve a budget surplus by 2024, and try to reduce their debt, which to me is completely unnecessary. Lots of emerging markets and international markets actually can be sustained through budget deficits and sustainable debt levels. What you need more spending on the ground. Government needs to actually...
not this austerity that we keep seeing.
Yes.
Spend. Bonga, you know, I wish we could speak for longer. Some great insights coming from you. I wish we could also touch on capitalism and whether it's working for the country now, given what happened with the July unrest and great inequality. But unfortunately, we've run out of time. It is a fluid program today. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.